The U.S. just launched another deadly strike in the Caribbean, killing 3 men on a small vessel that the Pentagon says was operated by a designated terrorist organization. That's right, American missiles, international waters, and a warning from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. If you traffic drugs, we will kill you. This marks the 18th such strikes in September, and according to official counts, over 60 people have now been killed. But here's the question nobody seems to be asking clearly. Is this really a war on drugs, or a show of military power disguised as one? Because what's happening right now in the Caribbean Sea might look like a military operation, but it's also a story about law, accountability, and power. The latest strike, confirmed by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, targeted what he called a narco-terrorist vessel. He posted a video on X, a 20-second clip of a speedboat getting blown up in the middle of the ocean. No evidence, no independent verification, just a short clip and a caption, "Mission accomplished." Now, to be clear, drug trafficking is a real problem. Fentanyl and cocaine have devastated communities across America. Hundreds of thousands of overdoses. Entire towns hollowed out. So yes, the impulse to do something makes sense. But what's new and deeply controversial is how far this administration is willing to go. President Trump has now authorized military strikes in international waters, claiming that drug traffickers count as terrorists under U.S. law. That gives the Pentagon the legal green light to use lethal force, even outside American territory, without a declaration of war. On one hand, supporters say this is long overdue. They argue that cartels are effectively terrorist organizations using violence, corruption, and fentanyl to kill Americans. So why not hit them with the same force the U.S. uses against ISIS or Al-Qaeda? Pete Hegseth himself said it bluntly, "If you want to stay alive, stop trafficking drugs." That's the message. Deterrence through fear. But critics, including human rights groups, members of Congress, and international observers, say this is extrajudicial killing, plain and simple. No due process, no proof, just drone strikes and press releases. And look, you don't have to be a foreign policy expert to see why that's alarming. If the US can just declare any vessel a terrorist threat and blow it up without presenting evidence, what stops any other country from doing the same? Imagine China sinking a fishing boat near Taiwan and saying, "Oh, they were smuggling weapons," or Russia hitting a ship in the Black Sea and claiming terrorist connections. You'd call that an illegal strike. So why is it different when it's us? Here's where it gets even more complicated. Democrats and even some senior Republicans are demanding to know the legal basis for these attacks. The United Nations Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, condemned them as violations of international law. Senator Adam Schiff tried to push a bill that would limit Trump's power to launch strikes without congressional approval, but it failed by just 2 votes, 51 to 49. So right now, there is no effective check on Trump's ability to order attacks in the Caribbean or even as is threatened inside Venezuela. Yeah, that's the other part of the story that isn't getting enough attention. Trump and his allies insist these strikes are about stopping drugs, when multiple sources, including lawmakers and intelligence officials, say there's another motive: regime change. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has accused Trump of using the war on drugs as cover to destabilize his government. And honestly, the timeline adds up. In the last few months, there's been a massive U.S. naval buildup near Venezuela. Trump has publicly accused Maduro of being a drug kingpin. He's also boasted about authorizing covert CIA operations in the country. So when you put it all together, this looks less like a war on cocaine and more like the early stages of a covert intervention. But before we jump to conclusions, let's ask the key question: what's the proof? Because so far, the administration hasn't shown any verifiable evidence that these vessels were actually carrying drugs. No cargo recovered, no identities confirmed, no international inspection. Just boom, gone. And once that footage hits social media, it's impossible to fact-check what was on that boat. That's why this moment feels dangerous. Because when the government starts waging war based on classified intelligence and Twitter videos, that's not transparency, that's propaganda. Think about it like this. Imagine the police saying, "We found a criminal in your neighborhood, so we blew up his house. Don't ask for evidence, just trust us." You'd be like, wait, what? That's not law enforcement. That's vigilantism with missiles. And yet, that's essentially what's happening on the high seas right now, but on a global scale. Now, to be fair, the US has conducted counter-narcotics operations for decades. This isn't new, but the scale and aggressiveness of these recent strikes are unprecedented. Previous administrations relied on interdictions, seizing ships, arresting crews, working with regional partners. Trump's approach: skip the arrest, go straight to kinetic action. And that raises a deeper issue about what security even means now. Are we safer because 3 alleged smugglers were killed? Or are we inching closer to a future where every American president has their own private war outside any legal oversight? Because here's the thing: if you're okay with this today because it's happening over there, don't be surprised when the same logic gets used over here. Unchecked power never stays limited to one ocean. So here's where we are: 18 strikes, 60 dead, zero evidence made public, and an administration that says the campaign will continue indefinitely. Supporters say it's saving American lives. Critics say it's eroding international law. And the rest of the world, watching, wondering how far this war on narco-terror will go. Because when military force becomes the first response, not the last resort, that's when a democracy starts crossing lines it can't easily uncross. At the end of the day, this isn't just a story about missiles and boats. It's a story about power, accountability, and truth. And until the US government can show the evidence behind these strikes, the real question isn't how many traffickers did we kill. It's how many laws did we just break to do it. I'm Mazar, and this is what happens when foreign policy goes off the radar.